in with my 468 thousandths divided by 6 and 5/10. So remember, this first number is what goes under the bar, and this number here is where we're going to look about the decimal, because remember, the only time I'm really going to move the decimal is if there's a decimal in this one. So I know we've talked about this in class. We can either look here and know we're moving it one place, or it's also easy to see when we see it rewritten like this. So I'm going to move my decimal, and if I move it one place here, I move it one place here. Remember, after I move it, I bring that decimal up right away, so that helps me to see that. So when I rewrite this, and I always do that because for me, that's kind of easier for me to see it in this way and kind of make sense of that. I'm looking at 4 and 68 hundredths, or if you want to think of it an easier way, as like $4.68, and you're dividing that into groups of $65. Let's think about that. Would I have a whole number? I have $4 and I'm creating groups of 65. Can I do that? Hopefully you said no. So you know, based on this decimal up here, that we're going to have a decimal. So we have less than 1. Let's think about that now. If I kind of round this, so I'm going to do another estimate, right? $4.68. If I estimate, I'm looking at like $5 divided by 65, or like groups of that, right? This is like 5 divided by 65. I'm going to make this into like 70 to make it a little bit easier for me, because I'm going to round up. And with that idea, oh, so I was writing for you when I was talking about that. So I was writing for you, sorry, when I was talking about that I was breaking it up. So I broke this 65. When I'm doing 65 times 2, I was breaking that up into the 60 times 2. And I know that that gives me 120. And the 5 times 2 gives me 10. And when I add these two together, sorry, that's a horrible thing, 120 plus 10 gives me 130. Well, that's the same thing that's here. So that's kind of how I did this one. So my 2 is what goes up here. And then I'm going to do 65 times 2, which I just did right here. And that gives me 130. And there's my answer. 72 thousandths. Okay, so let's move to multiplication. So I rewrote this problem, and I followed exactly the same, just because, let's look, there's 3 digits here and 3 digits here, so it won't matter which one, as far as for how many things I have to add together. So I thought, let me just model the same problem the way it's asked. Okay, and now, so I know there are 3 digits here. I should have 3 things I'm adding together. Those are called add-ins, right? So before I start that, let's do our estimate. 2 and 41 hundredths is closer to 2. I'm using that from here. This is less than 50, or this is less than 5, so I'm going to round it back to my whole number. Over here, I have my 78 hundredths, which is more than 50, or I even just look here on my 7. That's more than that, so I'm going to round this number here up to 9. 2 times 9 is 18. Okay, now I'm going to remind you, right, when we talk about our groups, we're talking about groups, so my estimate's going to be a little bit off, probably more so than when we add or subtract. We talked about that before. In this case, I took my 41 hundredths and I rounded down, so I'm losing almost 9 groups of this 41 hundredths. But over here, I took this was my 78 hundredths, and I rounded this one up to 9, so that makes it a little bit more. So we should be pretty close with our 18. Let's take a look how we end up. Okay, multiplication. Hopefully you've already figured that out, right? Always on the right. Adding, subtracting, multiplying, we start on the right. Division's that oddball that we start on the left. Okay, so we're going to go here. Now remember, so far our multiplication hasn't had a lot. Each time we're going to go from the bottom and we're going to look to go towards each of these values, right? So I'm going to do 8 times 1 gives me 8. Now I have to do 8 times 4 gives me 32. I carry my 3. 8 times 2 gives me 16 plus my 3. 17, 18, 19. Now I'm going to start with my 7. Now I'm going to do the same thing I just did with my 8s, but because this is in the 10 spot, remember, I put my placeholder. 7 times 1 is 7. 7 times 4 is 28. And now I carry my 2 because remember, I'm still multiplying. 7 times 4 is 14, 15, 16. Okay, now I'm going to start with this 8. Now notice I had to move over these 2 spaces, so here I need to put 2 zeros, and now I start with my 8. 8 times 1 is 8. 8 times 4 is 32, so I put my 2. I'm going to put my 3. Notice I'll just go over that one that we had. 8 times 2 is 16, plus 3 is 19. And then I'm going to add them together. I'm going to start on the right. 8 plus all these zeros gives me 8. 2 plus 7 is 9. 9 plus 8 is 17. So we have my 9 plus 8 is 17, plus another 8 is 25. Carry my 2. 2 plus 1 is 3. 3 plus 6 is 9, 10, 11. I carry my 1. Remember, each time I'm going to put the place from the 1s digit and then carry my 10s. 1 plus 1 is 2, plus 9 is another 11. Carry my 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. And then I'm going to go back to my problem or go up here to the original, right? And I'm going to look. I have 2 decimals after that. 2 places after this decimal and 2 places here. If I go back to my problem, right, I have 4 places. So I need to start behind the number and move over 4 places. So I end up with 21, 5, 9, 8. How did you do? And let's take a look because, right, our estimate was talking about, we thought, well, 18. Well, remember, we were talking about those differences in the groups. So that's why our estimate is not exact, but it should be pretty close. Let's take a look at our final division problem. So we have over here, we have our 496 divided by 54. Well, I don't know about you, but remember, I'm lazy. I like to do it the fastest way that makes sense. So I'm going to round this. This is for my estimate. I'm going to round this to 500, my 496 to 500. I'm writing it over here because I think you can see it better. And then I'm going to divide that by 50. Well, I'm going to use my other way, right? And we talked about this before. Here's 1 0. I'm going to cross off 1 here. Well, if I have 5, I'm going to write this here. So I rewrote this to use my inverse, right? The opposite of multiplying is dividing. The opposite of dividing is multiplying. So I'm going to use that. So remember, I had 500 divided by 50. So we talked about this in class. If I get rid of the 1 0 on the one, I'm going to get rid of the same 0 on the other. And then that takes it down. So I'm looking at 50 divided by 5. Well, let me think. 5 times what number equals 50? Here's my 5. Here's a 5. So I know I'm going to have a 1. And then I have 1 0 here. Sorry, you saw my thumb. You have 1 0 here. So this is going to be 10. So my estimate here is going to be about 10. Okay, so I put a couple other things in here, right? Just to remind us, we're going to divide, multiply, subtract, bring down. And I made my problem over here. I know you'll see it says times 9. My estimate is about 10, but let's take a look when I go to the division. I'm going to start on the left. If I have 4 items, I definitely cannot make a group of 54, right? 4 is smaller than 54. So when I move over and I have 49 items, 49 is smaller than 54. I know you knew that. So then if I move over, I'm looking at 496. Well, let's think, because my number has to go up here when I divide, and I can only put one number, I can't write 10. So I'm going to go with 9 because 9 is going to be as close to 10 as possible, right? So let's take a look here. I'm going to move this up. And we're going to make this my 54 times 9. So I start on the right. 9 times 4 is 36. I carry my 3. 9 times 5 is 45, 46, 47, 48. So I end up with 486. Well, look, that's only 10 away from this one. So I'm going to put my 9 up here because that's what happened when I divided 496 into groups of 54. I got 9 groups. So then I did my multiplication, my 54 times 9, and now I'm going to subtract. So 496 minus 486 gives me 10, right? 6 minus 6 is 0. I almost wrote it something else. 9 minus 8 is 10. 10 is smaller than 54. So what I could do is keep going. I would put my decimal up here, and I could keep going. Or in this case, because we don't have any decimals, we're going to write this as a remainder. So I'm going to put my 10 over 54. But I'm going to move this down here because I know 10 and 54 are both even. So I know this is not lowest terms. So I'm going to make myself have a little more room. I'm going to write it over here. And when I'm dividing, I'm going to take a look. So I'm going to split this at first. I'm going to divide these because I know they're even. So I'm going to divide this by 2 over 2 to simplify it, right? So I still keep my 9 wholes. And now I'm just looking at the fraction. 10 divided by 2, or 2 times what number gives me 10? That's 5. 54 is a little bit more difficult. So let's talk about that over here. I'm going to do 54, and I'm going to divide this kind of up this way so you can see. Same as what I did before. So this is like 50, and this is like 4. I bet when I do it that way, it's a little bit easier for you. So I'm going to divide this by 2 so we remember what we're doing. So I'm going to do this here. Okay, let's think money. If you have 50 cents and you split it into 2 groups, you end up with 25. If I have 4, like maybe 4 pennies, and I split that into 2 groups, I end up with 2. Well, isn't that a lot easier? Because when I do it this way, when I end up this way, I just go 25 plus 2, and I end up with my 27. And I don't know about you, but that's a lot easier to think about than splitting my 54 and having to do it that way. And see, you can do this, and you're doing fantastic. I appreciate you. Let me know how you're doing.